Good morning. Welcome to the Eastman Financial Report. I'm Dan Eastman, your host, and today is Friday, February 6th, 2026, broadcasting from the great metropolis of the city of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, on the mighty Cobalt microphone. Thank you so much for tuning in. Always appreciate your viewership here at the Eastman Financial Report, as well as throughout the day on all of the great programming you see on worldviewtube.com and you hear at Worldview Radio. As you know, we're a Christian broadcasting network, and we've been in this space broadcasting away since 2006. And it's our mission, our ministry, our passion, and our goal to be able to bring all of the news and information of the day to that great marketplace of ideas from a Christian perspective. This is first and foremost a Christian ministry, and we're very proud of that, and we're very happy to be continuing in this fine 2,000-year tradition. So we do without a paywall and without fees. You can hear our content free of charge, just as the apostles spread the good word 2,000 years ago in the Middle East. We continue today to do that in the great metropolis in which we live, the great global marketplace of ideas, and that's why it's important we continue doing this. If you'd like to help us in this ministry, you can do that by going to worldviewfoundation.com and making a donation. As you know, we don't charge a paywall, and you're not certainly not charging or being charged to see this content today. And we want to keep it that way. And by you making a donation, you can help us in that effort. You can go to addresses on the bottom of the screen. You can go to worldviewfoundation.com or wvwfoundation.com, or you can scan the QR code with your smartphone. It'll take you right to the website. You can sign up for a one-time donation, which is always helpful to us, or you can sign up for monthly repeat donations, and that has the economic benefit of helping to flatten our revenue curve a bit so that we can better match our costs to our revenue and stay, unlike the federal government, income positive. That's important. And if we're in the black, we're running in the black, we can continue to offer our content free of charge. And we're not like the federal government running $2.5 trillion deficits. So you can help us avoid a $2.5 trillion deficit by making a donation. And we do appreciate your support, because without your support, this is a very lonely road. And you can ask St. Peter and Paul and how lonely that road can be sometimes. But you do make a difference when you make a donation here to us. You can also help us by doing business with the companies you see advertising throughout the day on our network. We don't sell blocks of advertising time like commercial stations. Rather, we find companies that we know and trust, and we partner with them. So when you do business with them, a small portion of the proceeds comes back to us in the form of a commission, and that also helps us continue to bring this content to the great marketplace of ideas free of charge. It's very helpful. You can also subscribe to our Vault program, and this is really a great thing to do. We came up with the product called the Vault. It's worldviewtube.com/vault. If you go to worldviewtube.com/vault, you can subscribe, and there is a little paywall there. But what you get for your dollar is amazing. As you know, Brandon House has been in this space since 2006. He's written 15 books, and many of those are now digitally produced. They're in the vault, along with his seminars, conferences, events. All of that was recorded, and it is all now in the vault. So for a small monthly fee, you get access to an amazing collection of very spiritually uplifting Christian content, and that can be important. If you're like most of us, there are times of the year where you're sort of struggling a little bit, maybe spiritually, maybe just with the ennui of being an American citizen in 2026. This is a great resource for you. It's on demand. You can log in 24 hours a day, and you will find content that is uplifting. And it's very important, because Brandon has had a beautiful ministry, and he's really, truly brought forth the message, the gospel message, and it's in that vault. And if you subscribe to the vault, you can help this network and this ministry, but you're also getting access to some very important content that can be very beneficial to you. And it can also be very beneficial to people you know in your lives who are struggling. A lot of people are really struggling with faith issues, life issues, financial issues, and you're looking for some help. And if you give them a gift subscription to the vault, what a wonderful thing to give. Because what do you get somebody, or what do you give to somebody who's struggling spiritually or struggling in life? Well, just giving them that subscription so that when they're in a blue moment, they can go log in and they have access to some amazing Christian content. That's a wonderful gift. And you don't have to wait till the gift giving season until to December to do this. You can give these as a birthday gift or just as a friend gift. What do I give a friend of mine to cheer them up? Give them a subscription to the vault, because there's some really great content, and they will appreciate it. Well, those are the three ways you can help the ministry. You can make a donation, do business with the vendors you see advertising here, and subscribe to the Vault for yourself and for your friends and family. Well, let's jump into the news today. And of course, the news is always the same as the Congress of the United States does what it does best, which is spend vastly more money than it takes in taxes. We watch the impact on the national economy. But beside that, let's keep in mind that our federal government was structured with three branches. I don't know if they still teach this in school, and it's very difficult to understand what the public schools teach as far as citizenship today. They teach more social revolution rather than a comprehensive understanding of why our system is the way it is, why it was designed to work that way, and how it's supposed to work, and why it's a balanced system so that no one group gets to be very powerful. So we have three branches of government. We wanted the voice of the people, the Vox Populi, to be able to have a place to express themselves. Just like back in merry old England, we had the Parliament, which came into being, and well, it's been around a long time with the commoners communicating and deciding for themselves. But government became institutionalized in 1066 after the Battle of Hastings, where William the Conqueror took over the Saxons and became, the King of England. And from that day forward, we look at a Normanized England, or a French slash Saxon type England, which is what we have today. The point is, they had a parliament, a house where people could parler in French, to speak. People would come and speak, and they would debate things, they would decide things. The kings, being very wise in those days, especially enthusiastically interested in keeping their heads attached to their shoulders, decided that if you give the people a house so they can go and argue and fight amongst themselves, they will not be storming the castle. So we keep them busy over there thinking about the issues of the day. And of course, they'll vote themselves largesse beyond anything the economy can afford. So how do we regulate that? Because if the parliament comes up with a great platform that will bankrupt the kingdom, what do? Well, we have a House of Lords, which is a hereditary house that it's all the king's buddies and people who've been, ennobled by grant, to oversee that and have veto authority over the people to kind of keep the people calmed down. We like to let them blow off steam, but we really don't want them advancing interests that are contrary to the crown. Well, this worked pretty good until Charles I came along, and Mr. Cromwell sort of outmaneuvered him, and off came the head, and that was the end of the monarchy for 20 plus years until it was restored, because it's really a good idea to have a house of a place where the common people can go and argue and fight and decide on whatever's best for them, and then figure out how to regulate it so you don't bankrupt the kingdom. Well, fast forward in 1776 and 1789, of course, in the United States, we set up the same model because it was how democracy was structured. Now, the Swiss had sort of a diet that would come together, but the Swiss, being a very weak federal government and very strong cantons or state governments, were almost very suspicious of concentrated power. That's why Switzerland was able to survive outside of the the Austro-Hungarian Empire, or the Holy Roman Empire, and effectively became a little neutral spot all to itself. That's the whole William Tell thing. But the point is, and of course, Iceland has a very, very long history of a community-type Congress that's been meeting for 1,000+ years, probably the oldest parliamentary bodies on Earth. And of course, Indian tribes in the United States have been doing this since the beginning of time. So the idea was we would have this house where the people would have a voice, just because that's the way it was done in the 1700s. And lo and behold, we have a House of Representatives, where people from all around the colonies would, or at least the newborn states, would send a representative based on their population, so that the more people who lived in this state had more representation than the people who lived in New Hampshire and the little states. And that was a problem. Of course, that was a problem from the beginning. It was hammered out with this idea that we would have a Senate, which was sort of like the House of Lords, only the president wouldn't have monarchical authority to appoint his heirs and his family. So we would have the states have representation in the United States Senate. The states would have the Senate, and the people would have the House. And of course, the states would act like the lords, and they would sort of watch what's going on in the House. And when things got too crazy, they would, kind of tamp that down a little bit, all to preserve the republic, not the president, not the king, but the republic. Well, that worked great until we changed the Constitution and made the Senate popularly elected into 6-year terms. It's not like you can get rid of these people after 2 years. And once they're in for 6 years. And you look at Chuck Schumer and some of the other illustrious senators, and you shake your head. You just can't imagine coming up with a system in a democracy that dysfunctions so regularly and so predictably. But the point is, this is our system, this is our government, and this is how we chug along, and we do our American thing here. And of course, we have an executive, and this is why in the United States we have a very distorted view of the power of the presidency. We tend to look at the president as the king, even though we got rid of the king, but we never really psychologically got past the idea of a king, and that's why you see these retired baby boomer teachers running around with no kings. Wow, wouldn't it be lovely to have a state pension and retire at 55 and do nothing but running around saying crazy things on street corners with handmade signs for fun, and then they go off to whatever they do. Don't get me started with that. Anyway, the point is, we look at the president of the United States very much with having more power than the Constitution had ever imagined. And I think when presidents try to exercise that power, there's a lot of blowback. So we have an executive, and the executive's job was to effectively administer what Congress passed into law. The idea was that the people would have this House, and then you have the Senate, which kind of keep the people in check. You'd come to a compromise, and there'd be a bill, and it would pass both houses, and it's sent to the president to sign it into law. And the president's job is to execute that law. That's why the president can't make separate laws. It has to come through the Congress. Now, the presidents try to do this by executive order, but all the executive order really does is it orders the president's cabinet, and the president is in charge of all the federal departments and bureaus and agencies and the whole conglomerate of the executive branch. And the president's executive orders theoretically tell the branch how to do their job. Although presidents have tried to stretch that, and sometimes with almost stunning power. Like go back to Franklin Delano Roosevelt and his executive order banning the personal holding of gold. Wow, imagine that. The President of the United States can tell all the American citizens, you can't own gold. You have to send it to Washington, and we'll turn it into paper money, and it'll be gold-backed money, and you'll be just as well off as if you had the gold. Well, that was an executive order, and how did that work out? The point is, when we look at our federal government structure, it's becoming clear that from a financial perspective, an economic perspective, that the special interests that control Congress and the ability to get things passed through Congress is so omniscient and so powerful at this point that we continue to see $2+ trillion a year annual deficits because they're spending more money than you can take in on your revenues, your tax revenues, and your federal revenues. And it's a consistent pattern that nobody in Congress even thinks about. Man, maybe we should only spend what we took in for a couple of years, let the system cool down a little bit. No, can't do it. Just simply can't do it. And that demonstrates that the people have lost control of their federal government. We do not control the federal government of the United States. The federal government of the United States controls the 50 states and the population. And if you don't believe me, just take a look out the window. Like you can take a look west to our dear friends up in Minnesota are in a state of agitation because the federal government is out of balance, and it's not serving the best interests of the 50 states because the 50 states don't have representation in Congress anymore. They used to have 2 senators apiece, and that was the idea that once you become a state, you'd have the same equal representation. Each state has 2 people in the Senate of the United States who will look out for the interests of the state, notwithstanding the excitement and enthusiasm of the people's house. And that system is broken, and we are living in the consequences. And this isn't just theoretical. It can be proven mathematically. If you take a look at the $38.5 trillion in accumulated debt, that's a big IOU owed by the federal government. And where does the federal government get its money? From the people. It only gets some money from tariffs. So I suppose if you could pay the whole thing off with tariffs, who would care? It'd be a great deal. But you can't. And it's obvious that the tariff revenues are nowhere near the level of the income tax that's taken from the people, the federal income tax, not to mention your state income tax, sales tax, this tax, that tax. So the point is, we are looking at a system that is demonstrating. It's sort of a res ipsa loquitur, as we say in the law. Let the thing speak for itself. Just stand back and look and say, wow. If I were running a business, I certainly wouldn't be running deficits every year since 1945. You wouldn't be in business. You certainly wouldn't be running annual deficits. You certainly wouldn't want your accumulated debt to equal entire national income. And plus. But those are the decisions that are made collectively. And there's no mechanism to reel that in because the states have no power. Now, you could do a constitutional convention, and there's always been rattles about that. And then some people say, yeah, we got to, balanced budget, limit the terms, do this, do that, reel them in. And then, of course, there are people on the other side are saying, yes, please call a constitutional convention because we're going to change the whole world. It'll be a beautiful Marxist world after we're done. That's the risk because our American Constitution is our one platform for governance. If that document fails, then it's bedlam, that's chaos. And we would prefer not to live in a society of chaos. I certainly would not want to live in a society of chaos because you can see around the world what's happened. Once stable governments like Lebanon, you think of Beirut being at one time known as the Paris of the Mediterranean. It's an amazing city, a diversified city. You had different ethnic groups, you had different religious groups, and all functioning. It's a great economic system. Everybody's having a nice time, and it's beautiful. The city's beautiful, the architecture. It's all fallen into chaos to the point where nobody looks at Lebanon as being anything other than an unstable mess. And you can go all around the Mediterranean rim on the southern side and see the same phenomenon. If you watch the interesting things that are happening in Libya today, I mean, it's you don't want to be in a constitutional crisis. What we need to do is fix the problem so that we can become a stronger nation that is based upon self-production, manufacturing, agriculture, and effectively grow the wealth of the nation. It might be worthwhile to dust off the copy of The Wealth of Nations written by Adam Smith in the 1700s and maybe put the old Das Kapital back on the bookshelf to gather a little dust and maybe start thinking about different alternative systems that is better for the citizens and better for mankind or humankind than we are currently looking at, which in some people's view is effectively the 50 states being colonies of Washington, D.C. And that's an interesting problem. When you start to think about what did it look like? How bad was it in 1771 or 1772 as a British colony? Well, a lot of people, the Tories, they thought it's pretty nice around here, and off to Canada they went when things got hot. But ask yourself the question, what is different between today and then? Taxation without representation? Well, you got taxation. We don't even have to worry about taxing because if we don't collect enough tax dollars, we just borrow the rest and stick it on the national credit card. It's a real interesting problem. But anyway, I'm going to take a break here and I want to talk about Bitcoin. I'll be right back. Thanks.
Hello, I'm Brandon House. Would you like to gain access to over 20 years of my radio shows, TV shows, my books? I've written 15 books, and most of those books are ebooks now, and we have conference DVDs, conferences where we filmed our conferences at the Ozarks literally starting 20 years ago. It's all available in our archived vault. All you have to do is go to worldviewtube.com/vault, worldviewtube.com/vault, and for a reasonable monthly fee, you gain access to over 20 years of Christian worldview programming, news, information, books, documentaries, and a powerful search engine. And folks, it's a great way not only to educate yourself, equip yourself, but it's a big way that you can help fund our continuation as a broadcast network. Please check it out. worldviewtube.com/vault, worldviewtube.com/vault, and help us continue pushing out a Christian worldview.
Okay, I'm back. So I'm going to switch topics. If you tune into the Eastman Financial Report every day, you'll hear me grousing about the 38.5 trillion in national debt and the 2 trillion plus deficits. So you haven't missed anything, and we'll pick it up on Monday. I want to talk about something else today, and I want to ask the question. If this were a classroom, I would say, okay, class, does anybody know who Satoshi Nakamoto is? I'd wait, boy, I don't know. Well, ask yourself the same question. Do you know who Satoshi Nakamoto is? Now, it's kind of a name that would suggest, from an ethnic perspective, that person might be Japanese. And I'm living in Wisconsin, which is pretty far away from Japan. So I do have some wonderful Japanese friends. I love Japan. I just think that's the most amazing Asian country that ever existed. But the point is, I want to ask you the question: do you know who Satoshi Nakamoto is? And I'm going to say I don't. I'm supposed to be the smart guy here, right? And I suspect you don't either. But keep that name in mind. And why does it matter? Why does it matter who Satoshi Nakamoto is? Is that a female or a male? Nobody knows. Nobody knows. I don't know. You don't know. Trust me, you don't know. So why does it matter? What does this have to do with economics? Eastman Financial Report. Who cares? Who is this? Well, who is this is a simple yet extraordinarily complex factoid. Okay, that name is associated with the person or persons who have created Bitcoin. And Bitcoin is a thing that you can invest your money in. And the point I'm trying to make is nobody knows who Satoshi Nakamoto is. Is it a person? Is it a group of people? Is it sort of an alias? I mean, who is it? And the answer is, and we've got brilliant financial people around the globe. And the answer is, nobody knows. Well, somebody knows. I mean, but they're not saying. The point is, you don't know, and that's the point I'm trying to make. That the average person on the street, you can Google this, you can search the internet from hitherto on, and you're not going to find out who are the hominids behind that name, Satoshi Nakamoto. Okay, this is the problem with Bitcoin, and I want to put this into perspective. That I suppose I'll be putting on my former financial regulators hat, the securities commissioner and utilities commissioner, and person who worried about honesty and money and transactions. When you think about putting your money, and what is money? We can spend an hour debating what is money. Used to be silver coins and gold coins if you were rich, and now it's paper dollars, paper money, ones and fives and tens and twenties and hundreds and fifties. And then of course there's the digital money that you get paid automatic direct deposit into your paycheck, and then or into your checkbook, and then you pay the electric bill automatically. You never really touch the money. It's just a bunch of numbers that just kind of flow through the system. That's money, okay? But it's money that works in American society. It's real money today. So if I get a direct deposit from an employer and I pay my electric bill, I'm happy. I got myself paid this smidgen of take-home pay that's left over after all the withholdings. And then the electric company's happy because I paid them. And of course, my lights are still on, so everything's in sync. That's all digital money. Okay, but it's how we calculate wealth. So if you can pull some of that money out of that stream and you can put it into an investment, electronically you transfer it to your stockbroker and they transfer it somewhere else, and you get an electronic statement that shows that it's going up or down or whatever the luck of the market brings you. It's all digital money. Okay, it's all digital money. But what you're doing is you're taking digital money that is recognized as currency within our society and globally, and you're converting it into a Bitcoin or a portion of a Bitcoin. Now, back in the day, I mean, this is kind of a shady experience. It all started out with a technical paper, a white paper that was written in 2008, peer-to-peer electronic cash system. Somebody was going to invent a peer-to-peer, person-to-person electronic cash system that didn't need the federal money that I'm just talking about. It was a different money. It was different money. And in 2009, software appeared. Now, software does not fall from the heavens, okay? If you know anything about software, there's line after line after line after line after line of code, and that's those cryptic little sentences that make the computers dance and sing. This is behind what you're seeing right now is just a lot of lines of code that makes it possible for the microphone to work and the camera to work and this to be in color rather than black and white and to be sent over the internet. All of this stuff is coded, the whole matrix behind reality, digital reality. So, but nobody knows who this is. You see, which is the suspicious part. Because how do you publish a paper and where is it published to when you're an unknown and obscure person, Satoshi Nakamoto, and then suddenly software pops up a year later? It takes a long time to code software. And then the Bitcoin takes off. And now when you look at it, the whole theory behind it is to have a certain number of coins that are created. And that'll be the total universe of Bitcoins that ever exist. just like yeah, just like gold-backed dollars, right, Mr. Nixon? I love President Nixon, but the point is, there's going to be just a finite number of these bitcoins, and of course, that will monetize the new electronic currency. This is exactly the gold standard, only using digits. Because in a gold standard, you go back to the mercantile era. How big is the pile of gold in Fort Knox or under the King's Throne, wherever they hide the gold? That's how much gold we are, and how many dollars or well, dollars or pounds or marks or whatever, are you going to issue against each ounce of gold? And of course, Bretton Woods said, well, it's $35 of paper US money per ounce. And of course, the French figured out, because they didn't want us letting Vietnam slip through everyone's fingers, they called our bluff and said, okay, here's our gold. Okay, here's our dollars. Give us the gold. Give us the gold. Here's your paper money back. We want the gold to send ships. Come on, load it up. Let's go. And President Nixon could do nothing in the middle of the Vietnam War except, you know what? They called their bluff. We are going to delink the dollar from gold, because if we had to give the French an ounce of gold for every $35, it was 37.50. We're going to clean out Fort Knox in about 3 hours. Okay, we don't have the gold. We printed vastly more paper than there ever was gold. The whole world kind of knew it, and the French called their bluff. And that's why President Nixon basically took us off the gold standard, or at least it was, temporarily suspended. Well, it's 2026 today. A long, the suspension outlasted President Nixon. God rest his soul. I liked him. He was a good man. He was pillared by a media a propaganda media that destroyed a very good man. But the point is, so we have this situation where there's Bitcoin, and of course, in order to make a Bitcoin, it takes a vast amount of electricity, because you have to mine them. You got to run a bunch of computers that solve a mathematical equation. And if you can solve the equation, then you can create a Bitcoin. Now, it's no small thing, because at the peak of this thing, it was $126,000 for one of these Bitcoins. So if you spend $300,000 in computers and electricity, you could whip out a Bitcoin for $126,000 and you'd be underwater a little bit. Well, of course, the value of the Bitcoin has collapsed. I think it was between $60,000 and $70,000. These things go up and down. They trade like pork bellies, And at the end of the day, it cost it, and of course, it's going to be a limited number. There's only a few more that can be mined, and this whole thing's going to be like set in stone. And when you think about this story, you just sit back and then put your historian hat. I'll take off my regulator hat, put on my professor hat here, and I go back to earlier times. Like, I want to go back to the Netherlands in 1637 and 1638. There was a tulip bubble in the Netherlands, where tulip bulbs had been imported into the Dutch community from Turkey, and they were very beautiful, obviously, and prestigious, and they happened to grow well in the Dutch climate for reasons unknown. It's quite a bit different climatically than Turkey, but lo and behold, they became astoundingly popular with the people. And it became a status symbol, and people began to demand and pay more and more and more and more and more money for tulip bulbs, because if you had some tulips growing in your front yard, everybody would figure out you're rich, you're powerful and famous and all that. And there emerged a speculative market where people would buy these things on speculation and then turn around and sell them on speculation. And they would start to actually buy them future forward, because these bulbs, they were imported from Turkey, and it took a while to grow these things. And that bubble became so crazy that one tulip bulb was like 6 times an annual salary, and the whole thing collapsed and just blew up, and it wiped out vast amounts of wealth from people who were speculating in tulip bulbs. And we still talk about it today. That was 1638. It's 2026. We still warn about it. Same thing with the South Sea bubble in 1720 in England. That corporation was set up to deal with national debt, just like our 38.5 trillion. And they were gambling. The South Sea at that time was Spanish America, Latin America. And of course, that bubble burst the same way. It became such an investment hysteria. But at the end of the day, there was nothing behind it. It was tulip bulbs. What's a tulip bulb? You can grow your own. And of course, the South Sea transportation of goods and services, that was controlled by the Spanish. The point is, we've seen bubbles throughout history. And the question is, this whole Bitcoin thing, I understand an ounce of gold, but what I don't understand is a mysterious maybe person who invented a system, allegedly this many things, and blah, blah, blah. And the next thing you know, it's $126,000 and everybody's putting their money in. Is this a tulip bulb, or is it a South Sea bubble, or is this the currency of the future? And if there is a currency of the future and it's digital, wouldn't you kind of like to know who's behind it and what the algorithms and the formulas are? And what's to keep digits are infinite. If you can create infinite digital money like the Federal Reserve does all day long in quantitative easing, well, what's to say you can't crank out another Bitcoin every time you need it? And we don't end up in a 1972 situation where there's so many more dollars than there are ounces of gold. Those are questions to ask. Now, I'm not opining as to whether you should buy any of this stuff or not. I think you can get the tulip bulbs pretty good price at Home Depot from what I've seen. But when you're talking about investing your hard-earned dollars, we may not have the most perfect digital dollar currency in the world, but think carefully before you jump into something you don't understand. And if you don't know who Satoshi Nakamoto is, because I don't know who Satoshi Nakamoto is, then maybe you ought to think about that carefully. That's all I'm saying from the ghost of a former financial regulator who used to say that trees don't grow to the sky. Anyway, I'm out of time for today. I'm out of time this week. Please go to worldviewfoundation.com, and I can assure you your federal digital dollars will be appreciated and will serve this ministry well and keep us doing what we do best. Have a great weekend. Look forward to talking to you next week. Take care. Bye.
You're watching Worldview 2. Built on the 35 years of Worldview books, documentaries, research, high-profile interviews, and the radio and television broadcasts of Brannon Howse.